Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Triple N Media. I am Dr. NIK NIKAM. You are watching COVID 19 World News brought to you from Houston, Texas. Today, we are going to be focusing on COVID 19 vaccine 101. Most of us are familiar with vaccine and what vaccine does, and I am sure almost all of us have received some kind of vaccine during our childhood. The most significant landmark in the field of a vaccine was in 1955 when Dr. Jonas Salk introduced a vaccine for poliomyelitis, which was one of the most crippling viral infections afflicting millions of people all across the globe. Jonas Salk introduced a vaccine, and his study was so strong and so powerful. His vaccine was approved within 2 hours. Every year we get flu vaccination. What does vaccine do? How does vaccine prevent us from getting these most deadly communicable diseases? The vaccine contains a sort of a attenuated virus, or a virus that is made less potent, and it is injected into the body so the body can react to the part of the vaccine and produce antibodies. These antibodies, which are produced, then can fight any invasion of a similar virus or a bacteria, and thus prevent a fatal or lethal consequences of a virus or a bacteria. That is the main concept of the virus. We take flu vaccine every year. Why do we need to take vaccine every year? Because there are some vaccines which provide lifelong immunity, like some of the vaccines we take during childhood, like for mumps, measles, smallpox. But what we take for flu doesn't last for more than a year, because there are new strains of viruses that are coming into the atmosphere each year, and that's why the vaccine can only work on the viruses that were there the previous years, but not for the new strain. Let us get back to vaccine against COVID-19. A little bit of physics or physiology. Vaccine goes through a various stages of development, research, and testing before it is finally put to work on mass populations. First, a vaccine is produced in the laboratory using virus or part of the virus. In phase 1, it is tested in a very small number of people, like 10 to 15 people. Here, different dosages are given to these individuals to see which dose would produce the maximum benefit with the least amount of side effects. When that phase produces antibodies in majority of the patients, the study moves on to phase 2. In phase 2, hundreds of people are enrolled, and we are looking for efficacy and safety. Again, efficacy and safety is the hallmark of vaccine research. When phase 2 produces good levels of antibodies to fight against the infection, the vaccine moves to phase 3, which is one of the most important trials before the vaccine is approved in the United States by the FDA. In this part of the study, like 20 to 30,000 volunteers are given these vaccines either once or more than once, and antibody levels are measured. These antibody levels are compared to the antibodies seen in patients who have recovered from the COVID-19 infection. And also they study as to how long these antibodies last, how well do they give protection. Actually, in animal laboratories, they can test these vaccines and then challenge these animals with the virus, live virus, and see how well they are protected. But in phase 3, in human trials, basically these people are given vaccine and their antibody levels are measured. If there is a significant population in the study group that produces antibodies to the vaccine, then it is going to be presented to the FDA for approval. Approval of the vaccine depends on its efficacy and, more importantly, safety. It has to be able to protect people against the virus infection and at the same time make sure this is not causing any short-term or long-term havocs in individuals when they receive vaccine. Once a vaccine is approved, this vaccine is going to be given to millions of people, and that's when we need to be careful about the side effects. Will a vaccine be worse than the disease? Will the vaccine complications be more devastating than the COVID-19 disease itself? That's what needs to be looked into. That's what's done in phase 4. When hundreds of thousands or millions of people receive the vaccine, their health informations are gathered on a continuous basis so that FDA can track any significant spikes in major side effects or illnesses. In certain circumstances, if the illnesses are of great magnitude, then the vaccine has to be withdrawn from the market. All right, research and testing of vaccine is just part of the equation. Once we have done the academic research, once we have tested the vaccine in animal laboratories, it goes through a human trial involving phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And once it passes phase 3, once the FDA is satisfied with the results and the safety, then it moves to the production. Production of vaccine is very complex and it involves major institutions to produce these vaccines in millions of doses, package them, and transport them to the locations where they can be safely stored and given to the individuals. So building factories, this is what majority of the companies are already having in line, like some of the companies like Pfizer, Oxford, or Moderna. They are already talking to major vaccine manufacturing companies like Smith Glasgow or Johnson & Johnson, so they can align themselves and have these factories ready to manufacture these vaccines as soon as they are approved. Once these vaccines are manufactured, they need to be distributed in an expeditious manner to the clinics, to the hospitals, to the healthcare centers, so it can be given to millions of people in a short duration of time. In the United States, the federal government has promised that the military will be in charge of distributing this vaccine to millions of people, especially the frontline workers, the healthcare workers, the nursing home people, and people who are exposed to the vaccines, like the people working in the grocery stores, receive these vaccines on a priority basis so that we can protect the most exposed and the most vulnerable population to begin with. Let's talk about some real stuff. Moderna is one of the companies which is a new player in the field of vaccine, but nonetheless it has been successfully able to produce a vaccine that has gone through phase 1 and phase 2 trials. Now, right now, it has found excellent immune response in all volunteers who received this vaccine in phase 1 and phase 2 trials, with symptoms, minimal symptoms like headache, fatigue, fever, muscle aches. Now, Moderna started on July 27th, phase 3 of COVID-19 vaccine trial involving like 30,000 patients, or volunteers, I should say. Similarly, Pfizer also on the same day, that is July 27, 2020, started phase 3 trial of the COVID vaccine. Pfizer also found significant benefit in the phase 2 trial, where almost all of their patients produce antibodies after the second dose of the vaccine, and those antibody levels were comparable to people who had recovered from the coronavirus infection. Pfizer, in fact, received $2 billion federal aid for mass production of vaccine if and when its COVID-19 vaccine is approved. These are the two players from the United States which are the frontrunners in the vaccine trials. But there are other vaccines, like there are at least 3 to 4, like Sinovac, Sinopharm, which was Wuhan, China, Sinopharm, and also Inovia, Novavax. All these are vaccines which are already past phase 1 trial, and majority of them have been in phase 2 trial. But here are the vaccines which are in phase 3. The 3 Chinese companies, Sinovac, Sinopharm, and Sinopharm. So these are all in phase 3 trials. Similarly, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is also in phase 3 trial. This is one of the vaccines produced by the Oxford University from UK, and they plan to team up with manufacturers, about 6 different manufacturers all across the globe, in Europe, in Asia, in India, and also in America, to mass produce their vaccines and distribute them. Similarly, Moderna is teaming up with several different vaccine manufacturers, since they are new in the field. It's going to be exciting to see in the next couple of months as to how well these phase 3 trials pan out, and see which one of these front runners is going to be most promising in terms of delivering antibody production and having the least amount of side effects. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about vaccines, it is important we also look at the other side of the vaccine story, and that is some of the complications that can happen if we do not take absolute care of vaccine production. One of the most famous one is the Qatar incident in 1955. This was right after Jonas Salk had introduced the vaccine for poliomyelitis. The Qatar factory sent a batch of vaccine that contained live viruses, real viruses, that resulted in 250 people developing paralysis. However, this was quickly recognized, the factory was shut down, and the entire process was examined and realigned so the factory could reopen and start producing vaccine in fall of 1955. In fact, we are going to see some effects, some unwanted results when you're mass producing these vaccines. People who are concerned about these vaccines have a legitimate reason. I certainly understand their point of view. There are people whose children have been hurt by some of these vaccines, but the incidence of side effects or a very small percentage of the millions of people who are getting benefit from the vaccines. There are people who are concerned these vaccines may be introducing a different kind of a disease which may not show up today, tomorrow, or for next 10 years, but maybe 20, 30 years down the line, it may have a profound effect. But that has to be proved. We don't know. But we know of cases where people have been injured. And in those situations, there is a national vaccine injury compensation program here in the United States, which looks at the scientific data, which looks at the complications some individuals might have received, then compare with the scientific evidence and try to compensate the individuals who have been found to be harmed by the vaccine. When we drive on the freeway, there is a risk, ladies and gentlemen. When we drink, there is a risk. We need to look at from a global health perspective and see how many millions of lives a vaccine can save. Now, let's talk about COVID-19 pandemic. There are more than 14 to 15 million people all across the globe have tested positive for the coronavirus infection. More than 500,000 people have died from the coronavirus infection. And if we can have a vaccine that can slow the virus, reduce the number of deaths, and get our lives back into normal, that will be a major milestone in terms of getting over this COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. You have been watching COVID-19 pandemic on Vaccine Update. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch numerous educational videos we have on COVID-19 so that you become a more educated person as how you can protect yourself, how you can save yourself from getting the infection. And please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will see you next time. I am Dr. NIK NIKAM from Houston, Texas.